right, topic number one. Here we go. UFC Vegas 96 took place where else? At the Apex. We're not going to get into all of that, but we do want to talk about the fight. BC, Caio Borralho wins via unanimous decision. Really not much of an argument. I think all three judges, at least certainly two of them, gave him a 10-8 in that fifth.
Right. To be fair, it was a 2-2 fight on one of the three scorecards entering round 5. The other two judges had it 3-1.
Yeah, which is, I think,
fair.
Fine. Yeah, I had it 3-1.
You could argue 2-2. You could argue that.
All right, first things first. I'm going to ask you about the stoppage in just a second, but more than that, I want you to answer this question. How impressive to you was this victory by the resident middleweight contender of the Fighting Nerds?
Huge. Really huge. And let's be honest about where he's at. Unbeaten in this run in the UFC. Nice stoppage win over Paul Craig, but he came in a posture that thanked Jared Cannonier during the pre-fight handshake. Why? Because there's a number 12 guy who gets an opportunity to fight another number 5 guy with title level experience in the main event and a chance to go 5 rounds. So why was I impressed? The 5-round stamina that he showed. That's a big hurdle that he had to clear. He cleared it. The technical application. Luke, he won the fight with his jab for the most part. There are things that he exposed in Cannonier that I can get into, but I love how he came out there with that power jab to set the stage, really worked those leg kicks in round 1, showed you he can adapt as Cannonier inevitably got himself back into the fight. But I saw stamina and I saw toughness, because even though I didn't think this was anywhere close to the best performance of Cannonier or even the best possible performance of where he's at in his career, there were some parts of his game I was frustrated with, but he did eventually get his shots off. He did test Caio's chin to find out whether he belongs here or not. And Luke, we can make arguments about who we ultimately called out, the champion DDP, and whether that was the right time. It seems a little premature, but this to me was a big splash that I'm ready for the deep end of this pool in this division. He's got aggressive tattoos. He's got aggressive victories over lesser-named guys, but he had to go in there against a real veteran, a guy that you're not going to just out-hustle and all of that. And Luke, he took his best shit. He had himself cut open, and it didn't even matter. He scored takedowns. He did. I mean, there was very little ground play here, but he did everything I could have asked of him, short of stopping Cannonier, and boy, did he come close. And there's an argument there. I was extremely impressed because you're not going to look good against Cannonier. I know he's 40. I know this is a second straight stoppage loss. But you have to earn it if you're going to go in there and win it that way. And Luke, he stood in front of him and earned it. You got to give him that respect.
I echo your sentiments completely. I thought he stood in front of Cannonier, as you indicated. He got that big cut under his right eye, which was still bleeding during the post-fight press conference. He showed great defense for the most part in terms of what Cannonier was throwing at him. You could see him. He brought the hand up, and he would kind of shoulder roll a little bit either side, depending on what was being thrown. And I was waiting for Cannonier to adjust. I'm like, Cannonier, he keeps blocking your hook. You got to go straight. You got to go straight. He never did. So
it was frustrating. That was frustrating. That part.
It was a little bit hard to watch. Nevertheless, the point I want to make was, if you look at his fights, BC, and I was like, how many times has he gone for the takedown in fights? So in his Contender Series debut, which he won via decision, they made him fight another time. This was back in 2021 when they were still trying with the series. He had 3 takedowns. They made him have a follow-up a month later, and he won that in a minute, and so he didn't have any takedowns there. But after that, Omar Gadziev, he had a takedown. Armen Petrosyan, 4 takedowns. Against Mahmoud Muradov, takedown. Against Michael Olashechik, 3 takedowns. But in his last 3, Abus Magomedov, Paul Craig, and Jared Cannonier, I think he attempted 1 against Cannonier, and he attempted 1 against Magomedov, but didn't get it. But he had no takedowns in his last 3, and he's won 2 of those via striking stoppage.
Sure.
This is, to me, evidence. This is what I want to see. You got to bring the game that you have with you to the UFC, and you got to make sure that that's something you can win with. Your ace in the hole, right? Or ace up the sleeve, whatever the proper metaphor is. But you have to be able to grow. You have to be unless that one skill is lights out dominant. And his ground game is very, very good, but it's not like Khabib over the lightweight kind of good. It's still he can win fights with it. He can win exchanges with it. He can win rounds with it. He can win championships with it potentially. But it's not like that kind of dominant game. So what he's done is begun to round out the other thing. And we talk about it all the time. Like Mackenzie Dern is not afraid to mix it up in the pocket, right? Mackenzie Dern will take a shot to get to a better position, but is not necessarily delivering back on the development on the striking that you would hope for. Well, this guy is. I'm not, of course, he's not in jiu-jitsu what Mackenzie Dern was, but I'm pointing out somebody who had a bit of an A game. Now look at their B game. We talk about this all the time.
Sure.
You can win championships with the dominant A game, depending on how dominant it is. a Habib at lightweight, an Izzy at middleweight.
Ronda Rousey.
You can do that, but that eventually will come to a close. What is your B game? And now you can begin to see this. Now, I don't know if he's going to ever fight for a title. He was ranked 12th, by the way. Now moving in, Cannonier was sitting in the 5th spot. It is likely he'll get 5th or approximate to that. So now he's in a different place in the division. But the courage he showed, the development he showed,
confidence,
the confidence.
You can just a different aura and demeanor to how he acted. Even in the post-fight interview, there were a lot of things I was very impressed with.
Dude,
it was mature.
Jared is 40, and you're right. Coming off that Imavov stoppage loss, not great, but he's still heavy-handed.
Oh yeah,
he's still.
And don't forget, this is why I like what. Let me say it right, because I used to butcher it, and then I heard Bisping butcher it about 4,000 times in the broadcast, so I can say Borrallho. I don't have to say Borrallho every time.
Borrallho.
Borrallho ultimately showed me not just the cut, but he got rocked in the second round by Cannonier.
Big shot.
On some big shots, but not overly crazy shots in the flow of it. And his way of centering it and getting back on task, it was very mature. There was a lot that I loved intangible-wise in here. And, dude, it all went back to the basics. That heavy jab was such a difference maker.
And I'm so glad you brought up the second round, because he did lose the second round, no doubt about it. Like, even if he had a 2-2, if he had 3-1, the 1 would be round 2 for Cannonier.
All 3 judges gave it to him.
But this is what I mean. Cannonier had a good second round. So here comes the veteran pushing back on Borrallho, and he withstood it, then reapplied his game in the 3rd, was cruising in the 4th, and then, of course, it takes us to the 5th round, where he hits him with I think it was the hook, and then the 1-2, and the 1-2 was absolutely vicious. And it rocks Cannonier real badly. So my question back to you on this one would be, was Big Dan Miragliotta was the referee?
Who probably has taken out.
I
mean, we're talking about Japanese restrooms, Luke.
Yeah.
At a hotel.
Godzilla.
Just
Godzilla.
Yeah, wow.
But he's just Godzilla Tokyo. I'm sure
Big
he's done
John
it.
would only tell the truth on this.
You ever seen Big Dan in person?
No.
Dude, he's like much bigger than me.
Okay.
Like, he's huge. He's a
Okay.
huge guy. Did Borrallho get robbed of a stoppage victory over Cannonier?
Yes, I think so. I think overall, watching the replay multiple times, if what you're looking for specifically is did Cannonier go out, then yes. I don't hate on Big Dan in this case for not being able to identify that in the moment, because things move so quick, and quickly Cannonier did sort of pop back to life. He got hit with a ground strike, and suddenly he was defending himself responsibly. And I think, Luke, the only sort of, if I want to criticize Borrallho and what he did after that, was him going for the choke when he had Cannonier very badly hurt down there, gave Cannonier, in my opinion, a chance to survive. So that was the only sort of bad takeaway. Did he get robbed of a stoppage? Most likely, I think he did. But I think it's happened so quick in the moment. Bang, bang. Referee's not going to get a chance to see that replay. It's the final round. I don't look at it as a big referee smearing that he blew it. But yeah, when you slow that down and you watch it, it looked like he knocked him out. And Luke, outside of the fact that he came in here, Cannonier, fresh off a stoppage loss to Imavov, guys don't do that. And the guys that can put their hands on him and hurt him like this are usually top-level guys. So I'm not saying that Borrallho becomes that with this victory, but you said it in the idea that he's going to now be in a different tax bracket, now courting top 5 competition. Dude, he answered a lot of potential questions that I would have had. And that's exactly what I think you would want out of this performance, out of this main event. And Luke, I've been very critical for a while of the matchmaking, of particularly the fight nights and the Apexes. Really enjoyed this one.
This one was good. This one was
really good. So I think ultimately it's a thin line where it goes from acceptable to unacceptable. I think as long as UFC figures out that thin line and figures out how to stay on the good side, you need a main event worth staying up for. I thought this main event was worth staying up for.
Agreed.
Now, technically, I fell asleep.
Co-main, not so much.
I fell asleep before the co-main, technically, Luke, to be honest with you, from the travel fatigue and all that. But this was worth trying to stay up for. When you get Spivak and Tybura, it's a joke, right? On that level, that should be the 4th fight from the top or whatever. But as long as they have a main event worth staying up for, and a consistent mix on the undercard, which they did have, of risers who we're about to talk about, who made big leaps, friendly TV fighters, think Slava Claus, think Mearshart. These guys are probably more often than not going to get to the top of the heap in their division, but you put them in matchups that create the type of fun we saw. I always thought sometimes on these low-level fight night cards that you need one of two things, or maybe both to have a great time. A propensity to abuse marijuana or a gambling addiction. And a lot of people, Long Island Luke, you would say you combine both of those, right? I mean, in a lot of ways.
Aussie Rules Luke, that's your entire life.
That's literally every night of my life.
And, I may have had one of those two going on as well, but I'll say this, Luke, it's not that hard to actually get it right. Obviously, you need the fights to perform, but I really enjoyed this card. I really enjoyed a lot of the fights, and the fact that it ends with us really learning something, in this case about Caio Borralho and his the way that he promoted the fight nerds and that this seems to be a new camp on the way up that is really
They got some murderers
really
there.
making some noise. This was a great night out at the fights. And I think even in this era of watered down UFC matchmaking and the stretching out of the schedule to fill it, I think if they just make a couple tweaks like this, we can have this consistently, right? Even if it's at the Apex, which we don't prefer and love, it still was a good night out at the fights watching it from home.
I still feel like they have to trim some fat from the roster to really get this, because as long as those guys are on the roster, the ones that shouldn't be there, they're going to have to get fights. And so you're going to have to kind of muddle through that. So yes and no. What I will say is, getting back to the Borrallho thing, if I may, I wanted to just run this by you, see what you thought. Should that fight have been stopped? You definitely can make a case for it.
But you need the replay, don't you, to really see it?
So here's where I'm going to come down on this. Some of you think this is an accurate way to look at it, or a reasonable way to look at it, perhaps. In Major League Baseball, when they have umpires, what they don't expect is that every Major League umpire sitting behind home plate will have the exact same strike zone. They do not expect that. What they expect is that if you have your own kind of strike zone, that you as an umpire stay consistent to that. But they don't expect one guy on Monday to have the exact same strike zone as a guy on Tuesday. It's not realistic. In a similar vein, what I would say is, do I expect, for example, Mark Smith to have the same kind of strike zone in terms of stoppages as Big Dan Miragliotta? No, I don't. I think they have their own kind of sense about it. Within the universe of Dan Miragliotta, stoppages or non-stoppages, this actually kind of makes sense that he lets things go typically more. And I'm going to say this has not always been the case, but in the last few years, I think he's going to be the kind of one who errs on the side of letting it go a little bit longer.
Sure. And Cannonier's got a history.
Dude, by the way, Cannonier ended the fight on his feet. I mean, that guy is a fucking
And I
beast.
believe Whitaker almost had him out, and you could have stopped it too.
Exactly.
But Cannonier bounced right back. So you have that history.
So what I mean to say is, I think it should have been stopped. But I push back against the idea that we don't have consistent standards. Well, right, from Yamasaki to Miragliotta to Smith to whoever, Chris Taioni, you're not going to get consistent stoppages.
Yeah.
Within the universe of themselves, the question is, do you get consistent stoppages? And this is fairly consistent with what Big Dan has done in the last few years. Does that make sense?
I'm more than fine with it.
All right, very good. Now, with that being said, BC, he called out Dricus du Plessis. That's a little aggressive.
It is.
Not that he doesn't deserve a big fight. I think he does.
There's an argument to be made that if you're coming on, and he announced that he's coming on with this performance, right?
Yes.
That you do want to shoot for the stars, and if you get anything less, which he has to expect to, he can't expect to be the next person in line. But I think the argument, I'm not against the aggressiveness. I'm not against the ambition of that call out, but I am against, to some level, the realistic nature. It's not going to happen realistically. Will this mean, though, that he'll automatically get a top 5 matchup next? Does he deserve it? Can you make the leap from 12-5 with one performance and then suddenly expect to be getting former champions? You know what I mean? Where should what is the perfect next fight?
So let me read to you the top 5.
Sure.
Now, obviously, Dricus is unranked because he is the champ. So number 1 would be Sean Strickland. They probably have a future
He's getting
here.
the next title, yeah.
2 is Izzy, but who knows when he's coming back. 3 would be Robert Whitaker. He's got a date with Hamzat. 4 is kind of interesting. 4 is Nasruddin Imavov. That might be one you see, because both guys are coming off of wins over Cannonier. In fact, I think that's probably the likeliest one. And 5 was Cannonier, but then after that is Marvin Vittorian and Brendan Allen. I got to tell you.
Oh, they just fought in the PFL casino lobby. Did you see that?
I was like, dude, nothing is more Florida than the PFL holding a fight, and you can't remember who fought on the card, but you can remember 2 UFC fighters slugging it out in the casino floor afterwards. I have to tell you, to me, they probably will do the Imavov fight. But the Brendan Allen equation to me is so much more
so you could have
interesting.
easily said the loser of Whitaker Chimaev.
If it's Chimaev, do you really? I don't know about that.
Okay.
I just don't. Dude, Chimaev's in a weird place. I feel like if Chimaev beats Whitaker, then the UFC is going to really prioritize their schedule in a way to keep him active. But let's say Whitaker goes in there and weathers a storm and then beats the bags off this guy. Are they gonna what's his future after that? I don't know that. I don't know how to answer that.
I hear you. I mean, you can say the same
I'm not
thing.
saying that he doesn't have one. I'm saying, what is it? I
mean,
have no
you could
clue.
say the same thing if Robert Whitaker loses.
That's what I'm saying. If Hamzat goes in there and looks good, I think they're going to make a real push for him.
Sure.
But if he loses, it's like, I don't know what he is at that point.
If I can salt and pepper you in 92, let's talk about sex, Luke, right?
Okay, well, this took a turn.
The sex matchup, if you're willing.
Let's hear it.
Paulo Costa.
Against Borrallho?
Yes. Are you willing? That's a.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. So wait, you want to do Vettori versus Brendan Allen too in the cage this time?
Yeah, well, they might have just signed. They might have just built the backstory.
I feel like the UFC is going to be like, fuck it, we'll just use. Thanks, PFL.
They should, right? They should. What about Paulo Costa and him and you? And maybe even put it in Brazil in a main event.
So Costa is sitting at 8, right underneath Allen. You could do it. You could do it.
It would give him, meaning Borrallho, especially if he could win it, and it's certainly a matchup he could. That would give him a celebrity splash, right? Wouldn't that elevate him in a big way? I feel like if
Khamzat loses to Whitaker, you do Khamzat Paulo Costa, like the guys who were like the big scary guys. Next thing coming, and now you're like, what's left of them? I don't really know. You know,
that is. Hey, it's a no-lose situation. Why? Because even though it's not the best division right now, and even though it's not the deepest right now, and I think bantamweight still holds that mantle, there's still a lot of people like Jed Meshew II, Luke, who believe that lightweight never left as the best division out there. Middleweight's the most interesting. It really is.
So with the new contenders coming up, it certainly is.
No, even at the title picture, it's incredibly interesting with DDP, Strickland, Izzy, Whitaker, Chimaev.
Like I don't.
Come on.
Okay, but like as a fight, Strickland versus Duplessis 2 is not like, oh my god, I can't wait. Like
no, take that back. The first fight, what was that? A split majority, or maybe
I think it was split.
In 5 rounds, thriller. They both made adjustments.
Thriller's a strong word.
Okay, not fight of the year thriller, but a technical thriller in a sense. No. You do that in South Africa?
I disagree.
You do that in South Africa?
Well,
come on.
That's a different story. But in South Africa, I'm okay with it. But my point is this. Sean Strickland has a way of making fights trench warfare.
Yes.
Where we're just lobbing these shots at one another and some get through and some don't, and it's a hard slog. I really don't think you can call those thrillers. You can call those tough technical battles. Thriller is a very strong word.
But technical thriller, combining the two words, that gives you the indication that it was a chess-ish match that got exciting and had ebbs and flows.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's about as generous as I would give.
Okay, you didn't enjoy. You were not. Were you not entertained in that first fight? Come on.
Not a lot. Entertained?
Really, seeing 2 high-level guys, and look, can we bring in a third party here? Let's bring in.
How entertaining was Strickland versus Duplessis 1?
I think it was pretty entertaining. It was a back and forth war. I had DDP, pulled it out.
He said war. He said war, Luke.
Yeah, war's also a strong
what
word.
is it good for?
But wait, I wanted to say that Allen is fighting Imavov next
how did we forget? Yes, you're right.
In France, but I love the Brendan Allen matchup, regardless, win or lose against Borrallho.
Good correction, by the way. I completely had forgotten about that. We got to move along because, by the way, Danny Segura is going to join us.
Hey, I love Danny Segura. He's one of my... I don't know if he deserves hip-hop horns. There he is. Oh, he's here.
Yeah,
he's here. He's here here.
He's giving BC the finger.
I didn't even know he slipped in like in the middle of the night
like a ninja.
You know, the thing that we always say about Danny is say what you will about Danny's on-screen bravado. Off-screen, the guy gets it done, right? The guy gets it done. Like your brother-in-law, Pepe. Well, yeah.
Pipe is like short for Felipe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'll call him Pugnani if I need to, Luke.
BC,
right?
Let's talk about some of the other winners from this card that deserve to be.
Are you going to no-sell Segura's mojo right now?
We're going to have him on here in studio.
All right, I gave you a chance to just dunk that, and you're like, yeah, we'll wait. Yeah, we'll see you later.
Okay. It's 11:27, and we got to move the show.
Hey, I've been on vacation. I've been itchy. Okay.
All right. So then let's talk about this. Other people from the card who were great. How about in the women's flyweight division? What a breath of fresh air. BC, she dressed up like the Joker.
Dude, she's scary. She's scary.
She had a sick knockout. BC, you pronounce it Tong?
The broadcast, it looks like Wang Kong, it looks like, right?
It looks like it's Wang Kong, yes.
It's pronounced Tong, and she goes by the Joker.
She has a win over Valentina Shevchenko in kickboxing.
Yes.
And she bulldozed her opponent here. Like, she got her coming out of a reset with a single shot. It was unbelievable. Dude, she's got personality. She's got pop, obviously. Total self-confidence. I have been saying that the women's game needs somebody to take it by the scruff of the neck, and I feel like Tong is exactly what I've been looking for.
She has arrived on the scene as a finished product. And I know she's like 32, and she's certainly experienced in all of combat. I mean, that Shevchenko kickboxing win came during a stretch where Shevchenko just wasn't losing in that sport, and that was back in 2015. And so she's got that hook, right? The same hook Poatan had when he arrived in the UFC, knowing it may not take too many wins if you can get them to make an Adesanya fight happen. Well, Luke, what did Tong do? Took on a fighter who, yes, had been stopped every time she had stepped up against higher level opponents, the Miranda Mavericks of the world, that level in this division. But, Luke, you don't see first round finishes this nasty and dominant and defiant in the way that Tong did. And then Tong gets the microphone afterwards through the translator. And what does she do? Calls out the UFC for putting her in the curtain jerker fight to kick it off. Luke basically says, I want a main event next, or I want a main card fight next. And then on top of that, when they bring up the champion's name, is all about it, is ready to go. Of course she would be. Luke, I know she had to go through the Dana White Contender Series turnstile. Hope that didn't lead her to a 12-12 reality, Luke. But either way, she does not look like she's going to need that many wins to get into a title situation in this division. And it may not even be, obviously, Shevchenko at the end of this video game, depending on what happens in the Sphere. Obviously, 125 is populated quickly with fighters we want to see at the title level. No one more deserving at the moment than Manon Ferro. So we're still a few fights off. But how often do you see somebody come in and look this ready to dominate and have that feather in the cap of the Shevchenko history, whether they meet for the title or not? Luke, this is excitement into the women's game. And you were saying off camera, my beloved women's game. I love it. It's such a competitive when the divisions are filled and it's right. 135 sucked for a while. 145 was never a thing. 115 even going through some hardships, but 125 continues to deliver. And now we've got another player who, tell me if I'm wrong, does she look title ready? Not that she's going to get it next, but she kind of looks like a finished, ready to go product. Put her in next against an elite fighter. Let's do it.
Hard to say without her rest of her game being audited at this level for the grappling component, but the striking component, she's championship ready, like striking component wise.
What would you want to see her against a Chukagian type?
No, dude, you got to do the Alex Pereira
fast track.
Fast track. She's 32. What you don't have time.
Okay, so in that division, we acknowledge Ferro has next, right? Where there's no scenario where the Shevchenko rivalry with Grasso continues unless there's another draw. Is that correct?
Even with a draw, I don't know if it continues. You know what I mean? I think they might just move on after
Then
that.
you have Rose versus Aaron Blanchfield, which will be a big fight in title contention.
Yes.
But it's not, even with the upkick in names that we care about at 125, it's not as if there's a long line of title-ready people at the moment. She could fill that gap quickly. Did she also call out King Casey O'Neill?
She did.
I believe that's a good call-out in terms of the escalation process.
A great call-out. Fast track it. Let's do it.
All right.
I'm all in favor. By the way, there were 2 winners of the Ultimate Fighter. They just buried the Ultimate Fighter on a nubs.
It never felt so meaningless.
Utterly meaningless.
Even though I like the fights.
I was going to say Ryan Loder gets a win over Robert Valentin.
That was gutsy. That guy has a McKenzie vibe where he comes in strong ground game, wrestling
Division
background.
1 All-American out of Northern Iowa. He can wrestle. Obviously, he can grapple a little bit as well. Myron Santos getting a vicious KO.
We'll see some shit with him later.
Over Khan Ofli. That was ridiculous. But the one I want to highlight was Michael Morales out of Ecuador. He remains undefeated, 17-0, defeating Neil Magny. Bisping on the broadcast was saying he was giving up his back. That was strategic on purpose. It was not a mistake. It was.
Yeah, I think Bisping had his worst night ever as an announcer.
I don't know about that. I didn't listen to the whole card, but I was in that particular moment. That was actually not correct. Like you could. This is what, for example, it's the same thing that against Islam Makhachev that Volkanovski did, where you plant your forehead in the cage. It's actually hard to take your back. No one's really going to invert underneath, and so it actually ends up being a situation where you can show your back, but it's actually a safe position. He did that, spins to the back, crushes Magny with it, and then basically just follows up and then demolishes him. What a win for him, dude. This was perfect matchmaking, super exciting, major delivery. The guy is a tank at 170. Unbeaten, has a judo background. They were calling him like a bit of a striker, which he can be. He is heavy-handed, but he's got a judo background. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Michael Morales.
He has badass energy, too. You know what I'm saying? Do you remember when he had that really ballooned ear a year ago? It was almost James Colossus Thompson-esque. And now he's got really gnarly cauliflower ear in his right ear, I believe. I don't think I've ever seen
the Spider-Man thing he's doing.
I don't think I've ever seen it that
thing?
gross, but he's got the tack combo. He's in sick shape. He is a finisher that goes after it. He carries himself in that swagger that says he's arrived, he's ready to do some business, and to take care of somebody like Magny that quickly sends a huge message. Then you go back and you're like, oh shit, he's unbeaten to this run, and he's absolutely blown through some people. I want to see more. I love the Spider-Man bit. I can't wait. Rising banger alert. That's what I'm saying. This card had those under storylines, but like second and third tier storylines that were really interesting.
And then last but not least for me, there was other good fights on this card. As you mentioned, Slavaclaw's got a nice win. But how about Gerald Mearshart and Edmund Shabazian? Gerald Mearshart taking a bit of a beating, gets dropped, I think, in the first round. Maybe was it the first or second round he got dropped?
I think it was the second.
Second round. He gets dropped with a body shot. And Shabazian, dude, in the first round, I'm watching this fight, and I'm like, how did Shabazian, because I watched it after the fact, like,
Sure.
how did Shabazian lose this? Like, he's fighting at
He's
just the right
He's
pace.
the best first-round fighter we have. He's like Amir Khan
But
right
more
now.
than that, he wasn't going bananas. He was just fighting at the right pace, drops Mearshart in the second, and then goes bananas trying to finish him, gasses, and then loses. I'm like, dude, that is such a devastating loss for him. I mean, he's had a few of these now.
It is.
But this is like, you're at this point now where I don't know if he has a cardio issue, if he has an injury issue, a training issue, but he's got a performance issue, and it's a problem.
Now, he said on Instagram afterwards that it was almost an apologetic post saying, like, I gassed myself out going for the finish. I thought I had the opening there. But, Luke, here's the deal with him. Against average or below average guys, he can look spectacular because offensively, he has flashier skills than his entire game can back up. Would you agree with that? There's times where he exits and lands sneaky hooks. I mean, he is a beautiful combinations.
Yes.
He can hurt and really at times spectacularly finish lower level guys. It's when he fights guys with a backbone. Think of a veteran like Mearshart, who's tough, who has this sort of reputation that he can hang in fights on this level. If he doesn't get the person out of there in the first round, and what I felt the biggest thing holding back was, I don't know if Shabazian, for as flashy as he can be offensively, I don't know if he's actually a threat to finish good fighters or guys that are very recuperative or elite level tough guys. And if he doesn't, Luke, it's becoming an inevitability that he will implode, that he will find a way. So when you say, like, what is the problem? It's kind of hard. You could blame it on cardio. I just think, I don't know if there's a lack of self-confidence or there's something in there that if you can get him into the second half of the second round and suddenly his chances of winning start to drop dramatically. If he can't fix that, if that's something deep and internal that he can't identify and fix, then he's gone his way out, Luke. Because what is this, four losses in 5 fights, or is it even worse than that this stretch?
I'll pull up his record.
I know he had that death stretch of 3 in a row where it looked like he was really going to be on his way out. He did right the ship. He got a stoppage win in the fight before this.
Pop quiz, how old is Shabazian?
26?
26. So he lost 3 in a row to Brunson, Hermanson, and Imavov. Okay, ranked guys.
Seriously.
He gets a rebound against Dalka Lungiambula, who has the biggest traps I've ever seen in my life. Then loses again to Anthony Hernandez, Fluffy Hernandez, who's very good.
That fight in between, yeah.
Rebounds against AJ Dobson, but then loses to Gerald Mearshart. It's like every time they try and get him to escalate back up, it flops.
Because he can't finish these guys early, and I don't think he knows how to win fights outside of that, Luke. You don't see decision wins against good names on his record. He's going to get the lower tier guys out of there, or he's going to find a way to lose it. And that's a harsh thing to say into a microphone, but the track record backs it up.
It does back it up. Aussie Rules, Luke, what were you going to say?
I was going to say Edmund does not have a win over someone currently in the UFC since Brad Tavares in 2019.
Jesus. That was a nice win, too. Dude, in 2019, when he finished Brad Tavares, it was a first-round shot. I was like, this guy is going to be...
He was still with Coach Edmund back then.
Yeah, 21 years old. I was like, this guy is going to be an absolute dynamo. Nope, didn't happen.
Wasn't he managed by Rousey for a bit?
I think that's true. I don't know what the current state of it. No, I think that's true. And he also left there. Now he trains in Vegas.
Do you think she should post an apology to him as well 11 years later?
That didn't go well, did it?
Well,
actually, you know what? I thought her apology was actually pretty good.
No, the apology was great, but Reddit brought it out of her. Like that AMA she signed up for seemed sketchy at best, and they brought it. I mean, they've tried to take down people before. I don't know if you've. Yeah, I mean.
The power is significant.
Yeah,
I can say that. Yeah. Anything else you want to shout out before we move on to topic 2?
I mean, you just seriously Mearshart's ability to take a beat and keep on ticking, and you know what
ties Anderson Silva for the most finishes in middleweight history.
It's one of those kind of rare stats, but we need fighters like this. We need fights like this.
Dude, he's got really clean, very MMA friendly jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely, he's got a good attitude. They even asked him what was his take about being there for that PFL fight between Allen and Vettori.
Yeah.
And he totally was like, oh, those guys weren't there. I didn't see anything. He totally got their back that. No, he's a cool dude, but you look at that run of being able to submit guys. Now the question becomes, can he do this on a higher level? He hasn't proven that. He's a guy that will juggle 3 wins and 3 losses and be like that. But this really was a nice sort of chance to give him his flowers for the toughness to stay through it. And then his ground game is absolutely elite.
Very good.
So it was fun to see. Just another storyline in this division that this card helped propitiate. Luke, middleweight, so much fun this year. I wish you would just admit it. I mean, be like Joe Pyfer's in here. I mean, there's a lot of fighters that are coming on.
I think the UFC is certainly working on breaking ground for additional infrastructure for the Apex.
Yeah.
They want to be able to do what I guess it was an NXT show that was there.
Sure.
I think if they do that, and first of all, that would be a huge difference maker. And then I don't think every card that as at the Apex can be quite as nimble and fun as this one. But to your point, when they're pretty great. At least
I don't think we're going to talk about this in a year. And when I say this, I mean our hatred for the Apex, because obviously the arena is going to grow. Like you're saying, it's going to change the atmosphere.
I do have one
They're going to
question
be
for
on.
you.
No, I'm talking to you. They're going to be on the road more. But I think our problems with matchmaking, I think as long as they don't put out main events that are just obvious flat tires, they're going to be fine because the crowd noise at these places. And if we can go, what's the Apex population? What is it, 1,000 that can fill in there? I mean,
Maybe a little bit more with NXT configuration.
right. And sometimes as it's set up right now, you're getting a lot of people that are buying couple $1,000 purchases to sit there, and maybe they're not huge fight fans. We get back in front of 3,000 aggressive, huge fight fans there. It's going to be, we're not going to talk about this in a year. The fight nights will be fine.